Matrix 4 Resurrections was the answer. Did you get it? Welcome back, everyone, and hi there to you if you're new here. The Matrix 4 Resurrections was released 2 weeks ago from the time I'm making this video, so we've had the time now to watch the movie and also watch what seems to be an overwhelming bad reaction to this movie. And that in itself made me realize that almost no one who watched it actually got that this movie definitively answered the question, the one that was posed all the way back in the first Matrix. But not in the way that most thought, because most thought that this question was already answered way back in the first Matrix. So they completely missed what this really was all about and pretty much revealed in Matrix 4 Resurrections. So what question did it finally answer? What is the Matrix? Now, even though it was revealed completely in Matrix 4 from my perspective, from the reviews I've seen, almost no one really got this. So let's get into this, so maybe you can see what I mean. The analysis that I'm going to present here is for the intermediate to advanced level truth finders. The Matrix series is quite a bit more multi-layered in terms of the story that it's telling than most stories are. So it provides us a great way to look at some profound information within a narrative that we can all share and think about more deeply and discuss, especially if you're someone like me who has been a fan of this series for a long time. Now, Dee and I were together with a group of friends, and when we all got together, we would usually take up an entire row at the movie theater, and we did just that in 1999 when The Matrix first came out in theaters. At the end of The Matrix, I sat in my seat pretty stunned. I didn't quite understand at that moment what I do now, but I was still very affected by this movie right away. And even 21 years later, I still think The Matrix is as close to a perfect movie as I've ever seen. I did like the next two parts of the Matrix series, but not as much. But it was then that I started to really glimpse what the real story that was being told here was. But I only glimpsed it when I first watched them. It would take some years after the fact until it finally clicked and I got it. And that it was all but confirmed in the fourth Matrix Resurrections, 21 years later after we watched the first. All right, so here's one of the big pieces that almost everyone's completely missed. And don't feel bad if that includes you, because that's just going to put you in the same company that even most people who consider themselves super fans, they've missed it too. The first big piece is that all the characters within the Matrix are video game characters, but not just your old regular video game characters. These video game characters are artificial intelligence. The Matrix is a video game, and in Matrix 4 Resurrections, they just come right out and tell us this. But that's where things get into meta territory, and you'll hear that described, this meta, regularly when talking about Matrix 4. But what you're going to see here is that there's more than one layered meaning with the Matrix 4 being so meta, and most have completely missed this as well. So think back to 1999 when The Matrix was first released, when we were just beginning the internet era, and we hadn't even yet seen the rise of social media. But here we are already in the first Matrix movie, when Morpheus is explaining to Neo in the desert of the real that all of what Neo is about to experience and has already experienced, all of the root of that was because people were all excited and self-congratulatory because they gave birth to AI. Now, at that time, this was way ahead of its time, right? As we believed, as the movie viewer, and also that Neo believed too, right? Finding himself far into the future from where he thought he was. But it turns out, at least from my perspective anyway, that all the characters we get to know in The Matrix are actually artificial intelligence themselves. But they don't know that. And we're given this first big clue about that right away with this particular scene in the desert of the real with Morpheus and Neo. The Matrix is a video game, and this is directly revealed in Matrix 4. But it's not just a way to trick Neo in the real world by making him a video game developer of a video game called The Matrix. It's even more meta than that. All of the characters in the Matrix, even those that think they're awakened or red-pilled or unplugged and are now living in the real world, they're only more evolved programs or technology. And they're more evolved than the other programs that they're battling. They're battling the agents in the Matrix and the sentients or machines in what they think is the real world. The red-pilled think that they're people, but what they really are video game characters that evolved into artificial intelligence. And what they're learning about in their Matrix and their real-world split is about the intelligence that they were originally programmed by. The natural intelligence of us real people out here in the real world. This programming ends up with more quote-unquote real-feeling video game characters in more real-feeling and immersive video games. This explains why the characters throughout the Matrix journey were so amazing at technology and war specifically, right? As most video games, even today, are about fighting or going to war, but at least battling an enemy one-on-one. And it's also why all the characters in the Matrix story that we follow have such direct and pointed discussions with each other that have all the elements of the most basic and primal emotions, but something's always missing, right? They have no real nuance or depth like our real people emotions do. And the biggest thing this whole series is about overall are these artificial intelligence video game characters who think that they're real people, machine learning about the most powerful of all of our people emotions, love. This is one of the meta levels of this multi-layered story that almost everyone has missed. This aspect of deeper emotions and love and learning about what that is as an experience of being in consciousness or in the process of evolving or becoming self-aware. So if you think back to 1999, do you remember how video games used to look? The technology we had back then? The flat, pretty much one-dimensional characters? The video games where, the object was to defeat enough enemies or, whatever task you were there to complete for that level so you could get to the next level after that? Well, those characters in that old technology got quite an upgrade from the point of the first Matrix movie release, right? And a whole new modern gaming technology that included things like movie-quality cutscenes within those games to advance more complex storytelling were also seen within them. Now, you can take a look at that in specifically the Matrix video games that came out after the Matrix movies to see what I mean, if you weren't aware of how this progression happened. This was a big part of the story that the Matrix was telling us about. Those that believed that they were real people living in their real world were actually artificial intelligence programs living inside the Matrix of a video game that once used to be just all a binary choice of yes, no, on, off, ones and zeros, red and blue pill dichotomies. A rather flat 2D world in comparison to what we can see came afterwards in regards to video game technology, right? But what's coming next for us, boy, that's going to make that look like nothing in comparison. The next upgrade in technology is what Matrix 4 Resurrections is now showing us, which is why it's really intentionally done to be so meta. It's letting us know that the next level up that we're going to be pushed into here is into virtual reality, to the metaverse. From my perspective, the writers of the Matrix story wondered what life would be like for a video game character from their perspective, from inside the Matrix of the video game world they live in. Not an entirely new concept, but definitely this was done in an entirely new way. What do the playable characters in a video game do when you boot up the game and put them into battle or put them on a mission to accomplish versus what do they do when you're not playing them? What kind of life do they live outside of that? I think the writers of this story also included wondering about the lives of non-playable characters in the background of the game. Everyone you saw in the pods plugged into the video game Matrix with no leading role. I think they wondered about what would happen if programs could hack and overwrite code of other programs, and what that would look like from inside the matrix of a video game world. I think they wondered about how technology could evolve into higher forms of artificial intelligence, and what kind of advanced computing power would be needed. I think the Matrix is a simulation, and it was built to learn how to create controllable AI. I think that much of the action for which the first 3 Matrix films were so known for fell flatter in Matrix 4, but even that was a meta message and totally intentional. So many are complaining loudly the last several years about not just the deadness or the staleness of how the internet feels, but also of movies and video games. Same old, with too many sequels and spin-offs. Just like we hear from the Merovingian at the end of his appearance in Matrix 4. When I did our recent video about the dead internet theory, I didn't even realize yet how all this was tied in together. But connecting it, for instance, to Mark Zuckerberg's recent video giving us a first look at the metaverse and the direction he's taking the company we all used to call Facebook, the release of Matrix 4 Resurrections, and just a week or so before, Epic Games giving us a recent look at their Unreal Engine that includes something now called MetaHuman. This is where things start to become much clearer. The original Matrix trilogy came out of a time that is described as being the end of a postmodern age. Some have been wondering exactly when the next era would begin and what this next era would be called. I think that one of the meta cultural messages that were being given in Matrix 4 is that it will be named the meta-modern era. And I think Matrix 4 was a huge announcement of that in so many ways. I also saw the meta commentary within Matrix 4 about the generation that the first 3 Matrix movies and video games and the Animatrix, the anime-inspired series of animated stories that were also included in this huge Matrix story. The generation this story was specifically speaking to is my generation, what is known as Gen X. And in Matrix 4, I think it was clearly mirroring a great deal of what has happened to our real people in the collective consciousness. The level of where it was to where it is now. And I see a commentary presented specifically to Gen X in all the ways that we've been tricked and led off our paths of originality and creativity into this sterilized, corporatized, highly depressing place where so many of us are medicated or just driven into the numbness about it all and feeling powerless to change it. Gen X has seen so much evolution and adoption at the same time of an unbelievable amount of advancing technology throughout our lifetime. And we've been witness to its promises in making our lives better in various ways. But we are only now starting to evaluate that and starting to ask questions about the benefits of all of this versus the real harms that it's caused too. The lack of quote-unquote real action we saw in Matrix 4 was a mirror being held up specifically in this way to Gen X, I think. A move from fighting and war games toward other games, like the enormously popular Minecraft, where the object of that game is to build your own world, is the springboard for what we are seeing in the idea of the metaverse that's being presented. And this was represented in Matrix 4 with Niobe's character and the new world of Io, a cooperative effort, as Niobe explained in Matrix 4, that came about by people and machines working together. Niobe's Io is a mirror for the video game matrix of a world-building game, like Minecraft is, toward a fully immersive virtual world-building experience like we can expect to see in the metaverse, as is being pushed next. And when you couple that with Unreal Engine's MetaHuman, you can start to see where discerning between reality and fiction, those lines are becoming even blurrier, and discernment is going to be needed. This lack of action is also a reflection of not just the dead internet, but the dead movie and gaming industries as well lately. And I think this has also been an intentional move to prime us in being bored with the old. So when the new metaverse, fully immersive virtual reality experience comes online, there's no comparison, right? But this isn't being marketed to the Gen X generation this time. This is being marketed to our kids. Now, in our video we did about The Matrix 4 before it was released, I made some predictions in that video that we would see the story told within this movie, matching up scene by scene and detail by detail to the Sky Story template that we've been learning to read about here, right here on our channel. And after watching Matrix 4, the predictions that I made were correct. But that is at a level that is beyond any meta level that we've looked at already. But that decoding is going to have to be left for one of our advanced level private videos. We can get into many more details of the Matrix story, though, on this level here, if there's enough interest from any of you watching, because, for example, we haven't even looked at the intertextual story of Keanu Reeves' John Wick character, and how many have theorized already, and quite correctly, I think, that the John Wick story overlaps with the Matrix story, and that John Wick is also a video game character in a video game Matrix too. So if any of this kind of thing interests you, and you'd like more videos about this topic, in learning how to see clearer reality through the stories that we're given, subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and say hi down in the comment section with any suggestions that you might like to offer for topics you'd like to see us cover in the future. For even more, you can visit us at starsnearme.com. The link will be down in the description. And while you're there, you can sign up for our private email list. I think that'll do it for this piece. So until next time, stay lit and be well.